Hello everyone, I'm Junaid Haja. On behalf of Professional Association of SQL Server, I would like to welcome you all to the 24 Hours of PaaS Summit preview. We are having this 24 hours of online session as a preview to our promote our upcoming PaaS 2015 Summit. PaaS 2015 Summit will be the largest gathering of SQL Server and BI professionals from around the world. It happens every year, and this year it's going to happen from October 27 to October 30. I encourage you all to visit our official PaaS website to know more about the event. During this session, if you have any technical assistance, please type your question over there in the small box given on the right side. And we would like to thank our partners for sponsoring us, especially Microsoft, Idora, to visit our sponsors website as they support us. And this is what I mentioned earlier. We are having a PaaS 2015 Summit from October 27 to October 30 at Seattle, Washington. This is the largest gathering of SQL Server and BI professionals, and my MVPs from around the world will be participating in it. So I encourage you all to sign up for this. So I think we have a discount right now. You can save $200 by using the discount code 24HOP15. So it's available only till September 20. So I encourage you all to utilize it. And also Professional Association of SQL Server. We have a lot of resources, and these are various projects. I encourage you all to visit them. And before we start our session, and we are going to have a session today, and a speaker for today is we have two speakers. First speaker is Mr. Bradley Ball. He's a SQL Server MVP for about 15 years of IT experience, and he's spent like 8 years working as a defense contractors for clients like U.S. Army and the Executive Office of President of the United States. And currently, he's the data management lead with Pragmatic Works, and he's a popular speaker in the SQL Circle. And he has participated in events like SQL Saturday, SQL Rally, and he has given talks in PaaS Summit. Our second speaker for the day is Mr. Josh Laidman. Josh is a consultant and trainer with Pragmatic Works. His main focus is on business intelligence, big data, and Azure. He is also a regular speaker at SQL Server PaaS events and other conferences. He has worked for about over 10 years in application support, database administration, business intelligence, and software development. Without any further ado, I would like to hand over the session to our speaker, Mr. Bradley Ball.
Thank you very much, sir. I do appreciate that. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our 24 Hours of PaaS. Hey, Josh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I've got you, Brad. How about me?
I got you just fine. Excellent. So
Great.
This is going to be a preview, essentially, of the pre-con that Josh and I are going to be giving at the summit. So what we want to do is we're going to talk about the overall agenda that we're actually going to do for the summit. We're going to walk you through a few of the areas and just give you an idea of what it's going to be like in the summit and what we're going to do a little bit more in depth. So to kick things off, let's go over our agenda. When we're at the summit, we're going to be able to dive into a lot more than we're going to be able to cover today because, of course, we only have an hour, and this is the preview of the big event. If you have not made it to the PaaS Summit before, I got to tell you it's an absolutely wonderful experience. Josh, this is going to be your first time going out there, right?
Yeah, it's my first summit. I can't wait. It's going to be exciting.
It's funny because every single time I come out to the summit, I literally feel just as giddy as the first time I was there. When you make it out to Seattle and you make it to the conference center and you walk up to the steps and you see the banner that's sitting there waiting for you, it's just, you know, you're in for an amazing experience. When we get to the summit, one of the things we're going to talk about, the agenda we're going to go through, we'll do a quick introduction of ourselves, and then what we're going to do is we're going to introduce our customer of the day. The whole concept of the pre-con that Josh and I are doing falls into the fact that what we like to do is we love to help companies. We love to help them be successful. We love to help people be successful, just in everything that we do in life. And one of the key things that we've had a wonderful opportunity to do with other companies is they'll come to us, and sometimes you only get to do it if you've got a really good partner in a consulting firm, or if you're invited by Microsoft to be able to participate in something like this. But we do things called architectural design sessions, where we sit down with companies and we go, what technological problem are you trying to solve? What business problem do you need to apply technology to? And we essentially take a day and we go, okay, how can we use technology to be able to solve your problems, make you more efficient, or to be able to solve the business challenge that you're currently having? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a full day where we walk through this with you. We're going to introduce our customer for the day. Josh, do you remember who we're using as our customer?
We're using the prestigious organization, Wayne Enterprises.
Wayne Enterprises. I love those guys. They make great cars and computers, and I'm wearing one of their T-shirts right now. So
I hear they have a great, interesting R&D department too.
That's what I've heard. Their intern program, not so bad, but they do hire a little young. I think I'm a little too old for that one. But what we're going to do is we're going to take you through our data lifecycle optimization. We'll cover that in just a moment. We're going to analyze your company's risk, because one of the things we want to do is we were looking at how can we get so many different people in a room who are going to be coming from disparate industries, working with different technologies, and actually get a group of people to be able to have a really good experience mapping out the action plan that they can take back for their organization. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out by analyzing your company's data life cycle, but also your risk. Because one of the things we want to do is we want to understand where are areas that we could find for improvement. How can we actually help you make an action plan to be able to help you be a little bit better, or help you move forward and be an agent of change within your organization. The key areas that we will then focus on are architecture and configuration, availability and continuity, performance and optimization, and business insights. In business insights, we will be covering business intelligence, big data, and also some predictive analytics. And by the time we finish the day, our plan is to be able to take everyone and create a personalized action plan, get people working in groups to be able to talk about some of the changes that you can make within your organization. So diving a little bit deeper into this, let's just talk about what we've set up as our data lifecycle optimization. One of the things that we look at whenever we go to a company is there's essentially these 6 pillars that people want to work with. It's either architecture and configuration, availability and continuity, performance and optimization, enterprise BI, big data and architecture, or predictive analytics. Now, one of the things you'll notice over here is we have aspirational, roadmap, pilot, divisional, and enterprise. And this kind of maps out what our maturity is for these individual areas. For example, on architecture and configuration, if I ask you a question and I say, do you have any Windows 2003 or SQL Server 2005 boxes running in your environment, if you say we're primarily still running 10-year-old platforms, that means you're probably at a pretty high risk. The roadmap that we need to set out for you, I advanced a slide a little too quickly, is probably about right here. We're not at a very high maturity level. And one of the things that we need to do is we want to be able to take and assess exactly where you are to be able to help you determine what the next steps are that you should actually take within your organization. So let me go ahead and advance that next slide. So when we look at architecture and configuration, there's several things that we need to ask ourselves. The first is, what needs to be accomplished? Are we defining business goals? Are we determining, what is the business goal that we're going to define? The next is determining technological fit. There's a million technologies, and we're going to run through a good bit of them, but we need to understand what technology we actually believe is going to solve this problem. The wonderful thing about technology is you can probably solve the same problem 50 different ways. But what you need to do is understand the one way that you're going to solve the problem that's actually going to work for you. And then there are other questions with every single project that always need to be asked. What is our enterprise integration? What else needs to change? If I'm using big data, and I hope I'm not stealing too much of your thunder, Josh, do I need to integrate with AD? That's probably going to help me understand what provider I need to to be driven towards? What else in my environment needs to interconnect? If I'm standing up a business intelligence system and a data warehouse to be able to consume my data, what are those individual sources I'm pulling from? Who else needs to be able to consume this data? What is the availability? Often people look at things like their data warehouse and they think, oh, you know, we don't really need to plan for this thing to be online for all those little nines and things like that. But what you'll find is the more that you use your architecture, the more you use your business intelligence, the more critical it actually becomes to your business. So we need to understand as a whole for an enterprise, once we stand up this new project, what else needs to change? We need to look at the duration. How long do we believe this project's going to take? It's great for me to have this wonderful transformative project that we're going to be able to just roll out to the whole company. But what I like to preach to people is to determine the path of least resistance. We need to be able to make individual changes, and we need to be able to show results as we're making those changes. Often, we need to look at doing a phased rollout if we have a project that is going to extend too long. What are the milestones where we can actually stop and look back and say, we've done something and we've accomplished, let's move forward and get our next goal. Long-term sustainability. How many people will you need? I recently had a project where we went to a customer, and it was a multi-million-dollar project where they were buying some really big hardware, and they were spending a lot of money to have a lot of people come in and build some really amazing things. And they had never considered actually maintaining that after we left with a full-time staff. And it was a pretty daunting challenge that we had to face with them. And fortunately, we identified it early, because if we had identified it late, that could have really blown up. What skill sets do you need to maintain this? Do you have people in-house? Is our plan to be able to train people? Is our plan to go out and hire new people to fit it? These are all things that we need to consider when we're looking at maintaining an architecture. I can go out and find the best service broker in the world to build you an amazing service broker environment, but if you do not have someone that can code and read XML messages, you're going to have a hard time actually maintaining that environment and making it useful to the business. Planning for failure and managing for success. What don't you know? The tough thing about tough things is when you encounter setbacks, how do you deal with them? We can't always have success. We have to be allowed to be able to fail. And when we do face failure, how do we take and we then plan for it and we find an end around? It's really important that as we look at any big project that we do that requires an architecture and configuration setup, that we actually understand what are the milestones, what are the roadblocks, and we don't get too far down the road without knowing how we can work around problems and issues. And then last but most definitely not least, how much is the project going to cost? I can sit and I can draw something really fancy on a whiteboard, but it may be a couple $1,000,000 for somebody to buy. If we have a price limit and a price budget, that's going to influence that architecture and configuration. If I have an unlimited budget, every one of my servers is going to have 256 cores and at least 12 terabytes of memory because, you know, the next version of Windows can hold it. But if we were on a shoestring budget, I need to understand what I'm going to stand up and if I'm using a virtualization platform. Am I using VMware? Am I using Hyper-V? All of these things will combine into things that actually help us understand what technology we're going to choose, what's going to be right for us. And the fact is, technology is a big part of it. Determining what the right technological fit is. We've got a lot of things that we need to consider, a lot of technologies that we need to look through and that we need to work with. So one of the things that we need to do is understand those technologies and understand how they are going to impact the different scenarios that we're going to have for our customer. I mean, for example, if I'm looking at standing up a database and being able to make sure that I can maintain a scaling customer load and scale up when I need to and scale down when I don't, I might look at SQL DB and Elastic Then again, if I'm looking at how I can answer questions before or be able to find a predictive roadmap to be able to make and answer the question of where I should align my business or where my opportunities are, or where my leads are, where we should be going, what's most profitable for my business, I'm probably going to look at Azure ML. Then again, Maybe I'm looking at using something consuming data real time and being able to do some advanced analytics against it where I need to do some Azure Stream Analytics. Perhaps I'm looking at social media trending. I'm looking at sentiment analysis and things of that nature. Maybe I need to crunch petabytes of data incredibly quickly. Maybe I've got a country that I'm working out of that doesn't have, a very dependable electric grid. Maybe my data centers are antiquated. Maybe I need thousands of dollars to be able to just upgrade the things I have, let alone the hundreds of thousands of dollars I would need for an APS. Maybe I need to crunch such big data that Azure SQL DW is a good answer for me. Then again, maybe I need to look at some of the new features coming out in SQL Server 2016. We've got Stretch Database going up to Azure. We've got operational analytics, the new cluster, non-cluster column store indexes, always encrypted. Always on is going to get a capability to do some round-robin sharing. We're going to have another node that we're going to be able to select from for our availability. Not to mention we've got temporal tables, not to mention we've got JSON support, not to mention we've got Polybase coming out, and then Revolution R Analytics. We've got a lot of different things coming. And then we've got our Microsoft APS system. How does that fit in? And should we consider using that? If we can't go to the cloud to be able to use SQL Azure DW and we've got large enough data sets to crunch, perhaps this is something we should consider. And then let's not forget about our friends at HD Insight and Hadoop, which is the Hortonworks flavor of Hadoop that runs on the Microsoft Azure cloud. And then PowerBI.com, because after we consume all this data, surely we're going to want to visualize it in some way, shape, or form. And then Revolution Analytics. We all know that our support is coming in SQL Server 2016. Are we going to get additional support for APS, for SQL DW? There's already our support running up in Azure ML. What's coming down the pipeline, and how do we plan on using this? And when we look at visualizations, how does DataZen play into all this? When we sit here and we look at all these technologies, what we need to realize is as much focus as we can put on the technology, it's just one line item when we look at the overall things within an architecture that we actually need to consider before we can get to a project. So our key is to determine what our technological fit will be. But a lot of these different drivers, understanding the duration, understanding what our budget is going to be, understanding what the skill set for the people that we have on hand versus the people we're looking at adding to our organization, or the training that we're looking at getting for our staff, are all things that are going to play into our decisions when it actually comes to the architecture that we're going to choose for our company and for our big projects. The next thing that we're going to drive Wayne Enterprises through is we're going to look at availability and continuity. Disaster recovery. Remember, disaster recovery is more than just a backup. I can't tell you how many companies I've been to where they take backup upon backup upon backup, but they never actually test them. You can't just plan for recovery by taking backups. That's a good first step. You need to test for recovery. If you have corruption occur within a database, that corruption gets backed up. If you overwrite all of your good backups, eventually you will have nothing but databases full of corruption. And when you have that happen, corruption is a really, really difficult thing to fix if it's on a system object, if it's on a dependent object that is not easily fixed within SQL Server. And at that point in time, you're looking at potentially losing data, potentially having to move everything into another database. And if you have a very small database, that's not a big issue. When you have a database that's 12 terabytes in size, that starts to become a pretty big issue. I had a client I was working with recently, and they had a situation where they ran out of room on their SAN. And so to be able to make more room for their data files, they deleted all their backup. If you're out there laughing, you're not alone. I mean, that's almost a very comical situation. You would think, who in the world would do this? But it's 2015, and somebody did it. And once those backups were deleted, what happened? Well, the SAN had a couple drives go on. Had a couple drives go on some file groups for this 12 terabyte database. And what happens when you lose those drives and you can't bring one of the file groups online? Well, you can't bring the whole database online. And what you truly need is you need a backup you can recover from. And when you have no backups, that becomes a much more difficult situation for you to be able to first get the database online and then be able to get the database out of the state that it's in. let me tell you, it's very complicated to take a partition database where you have had a file group fail, force it to go back online, and then get rid of the partition scheme that includes these files that you can no longer access. That's not a lot of fun, and that does encounter some level of data loss. There are a lot of little acronyms that I've got right here: OLA, SLA, RTO, and RPO, organization level objectives. I'm sorry, organization level agreements, service level agreements, recovery time objective, recovery point objective. These are things that we should know for every tier 1 database that we have in our organization. If we don't know what's in our data, and we don't have to know every single individual table, we don't have to know every single bit and byte of data, but what we do need to understand is what this database means to our overall business, so that way we can understand what our organizational level objectives are. Do I have multiple disparate teams like in Wayne Enterprises, or am I going back to the day when Wayne Enterprises was just a mom and pop shop and it was homemade run, and the tech guy was also the office technician and the part-time janitor? I still need to understand what my organizational level objective is. If I'm a big enterprise, what belongs to the SAN group, what belongs to the server group, what belongs to the DBA team, and what is the response time I can expect when I need someone to be able to help me with something? What is my service level agreement that I actually have with the end business? If one of my databases goes offline, is it okay if it's offline anytime as long as it's not 9 to 5 East Coast time on core business hours? Or is this a web application that's actually busier during the nights and the weekends, and it would be better if it was down between 9 to 5? What is the service level agreement that I have with the business? Because that's going to help me to determine my recovery time objective and my recovery point objective. How much data can I actually lose? What is the minimum unit that I need to be able to get to my RPO, to get to that point in time that I have to recover from? And also my recovery time objective, because once a disaster happens, the stopwatch is on and everybody's paying attention. If you want pressure, just have your multi-billion-dollar company where its main database is offline and you're losing money, and you've got the CIO, the CEO, and the CTO standing over your shoulder saying, how long is it going to get this database back up online? That's a lot of wonderful pressure right there. And the thing is, if you've been through exercises, if you've identified, here's what we need to be able to get things back up as quickly as possible, then you understand what your recovery time objective is. Within this amount of time, I need to have everything back up and running, and here's the plan to get us back up as quickly as possible. I want you to think about this. If I had to restore a 12 terabyte database from backups, that's going to be a pretty long wait. At that point in time, I'm hoping that I've got multiple file groups. I'm hoping I can do some type of advanced piecemeal restore. I'm hoping that there's some way for me to be able to get that database up a lot quicker. Once I get it up, I need to understand the uptime and the 5 nines that I should have supporting that. The 5 nines, people always say, I want 5 nines, I want 5 nines. And when I have customers tell me this, I say, you know what, absolutely, I am happy to give you 5 nines. And I will go and I will draw on the board what we need in place for them to be able to have 5 nines. And based off their existing infrastructure, sometimes very large enterprise level clients, companies that are banks or hedge funds who have a lot of money, they don't blink an eye at it. A lot of other companies go, wow, so it's going to take that many millions of dollars for me to truly get to 5 nines, because when you get to that 5th 9, you're talking about, I think it's less than an hour of downtime for an entire year. And that includes the downtime that you take to be able to do patching and the managed in the plan. That's not even your emergency, oh my God, the server is down, the database is offline. To truly get to that 5th 9, you've got to have a lot of separate infrastructure underneath. And I have sat in meetings with people where they told me I need 5 nines, and I drew on the board and put a price tag in front of them, and they immediately went, you know what, that 3rd 9 seems just fine to me, and I think we'll be able to live with it. The next thing that we need to talk about is multiple environments and why they are important. Dev, test, prod, DR, and coop. If you don't think that this plays into availability and continuity, it absolutely does. I almost put the picture up that everybody's probably seen of the most interesting man in the world, where he says, I don't often test my code, but when I do, it's in production. I've got multiple stories that I could tell you of environments that I've been in where there was nothing but production. and it was only a matter of time before someone did something to either mess up the data, mess up the application, and bring the system down and bring it offline. And depending on how valuable that box is to your organization, you should really look at having multiple environments, having a code migration path, and making sure that you have good best practices for migrating that code and implementing this. When we get to the presentation, we're also going to talk about always-on availability groups, simply because it's not just for DBAs. It's not just for OLTP systems. The great thing is the entire BI stack is actually always-on aware. My connection managers in SSIS can use the connection string for always-on availability groups. And there's some really cool stuff we can do with that. If you have your secondary for your always-on availability group set into a read-only state, you can have read operations go and read off of that secondary database. So essentially, you can split writers and readers between levels within your SQL Server. When you look at SQL Server 2016, which is going to allow for the round-robin functionality to occur between multiple secondaries, you get the ability to have multiple SSIS packages potentially doing reads against your secondaries and writes only to your primary databases. You get the ability to have analysis services cubes using DSVs that are going to automatically hit your read-only secondaries, so you're not causing locking on your primary database as you may potentially be loading it. Those are wonderful solutions for us to be able to have. And as I said earlier, one of the key things that people often don't think about is they think, well, I'm just reporting off of my data warehouse. Nobody really has to have this. This could be down. But as your business intelligence systems mature, you will find people are making daily multi-million-dollar decisions, very important and critical business decisions off of these systems. And if you go to those people and you say, Mr. CIO, Mr. CTO, everybody in upper management, if we take the data warehouse down, how productive are you going to be? Now, honestly, as a manager, I've got a lot of meetings I could probably sit in without the reporting system being up. But it's going to impact my job, impact my world, and impact my business decisions very, very quickly if that's not up within one business day. And that's an RTO right there. I know that if something is down and it's down in the morning, that's going to cause me a problem by mid-afternoon if it's not back up and online. So we need to look at the availability and continuity of our business intelligence solutions and how we can actually utilize them. Next up, we've got performance and optimization. The first thing that we need to know is you don't want to be the cat in this picture. Beware of the dog. Cat is not entirely trustworthy either. But we want to make sure that first and foremost we have proper configuration. I can't tell you how many data warehouse environments I go into where configuration is treated secondarily just because typically a DBA is not the primary owner of the system or the primary person that sets it up. And absolutely, the things that are right for an OLTP system are also right for an OLAP system. So we're going to cover some of the key proper configurations that we should have on every single version of SQL Server. We're going to talk about monitoring your environment. I don't work for a company that actually builds a monitoring solution, so it's pretty easy for me to be able to tell you some of the third-party vendors that will be a pass. One of them who sponsored this wonderful session today is SQL Sentry. Absolutely love SQL Sentry. They are some wonderful people, and they're going to have a booth at the Pass Summit. I'd recommend that you stop by and talk to them. There's a lot of wonderful folks. Tom LaRock works for another place called, SolarWinds. Josh, who bought SolarWinds?
I'm not sure. I last knew SolarWinds.
Okay. Well, Tom LaRock has one. Oh, actually, it is SolarWinds. Sorry, I was thinking of his old Ignite system. SolarWinds also has a wonderful monitoring system as well. There's a lot of people, and you want to monitor your data warehouse because you want to understand what your stress points are within there. And we look at some of the exact same things. We may build structures a little bit differently for data warehousing. But the key is, if you're on SQL Server 2014 and above, you should be using column store indexing for your data warehouses. I may want to use heaps in some places, like on fact tables, and use non-clustered indexes on that, where in an OLTP environment, I would have clustered indexes. There's some things that we're going to talk about for setting up those environments and things we want to watch for. we would detect issues the exact same way. First off, we need an effective set of baselines. I was working with a client today, and one of the things that we did was they were having a huge performance issue on a massive data warehouse where something that normally processed in a couple days was taking a couple of weeks to process. And what we did was we went in and we baselined the disks. And one of the first things I found was that the disks, they had had a problem with their SAN, and they were getting a very, very low amount of megabytes per second. They should have been at about around 200 megabytes per second for the writes. They were at 10 megabytes per second. Yeah, it was really, really bad, but we immediately found what their bottleneck was. Understanding what an effective baseline is for a system is going to help you to be able to actually make sure when something goes wrong, you go back and you check those baselines and you go, is there anything that has changed in the environment? I can compare it against my baselines. After that, I'm going to look at the weights and queues methodology. I'm going to look inside of the plan cache for SQL Server, and we'll cover what you look for. One of the things I want to look for is I want to look in the plan cache to be able to find anything that's got some different plan operators. Rob Farley is going to be doing a great presentation at the past summit on plan operators. I'm looking forward to it. Unfortunately, we're presenting at the same time, so I will be watching the recordings afterwards. But there are specific operators that I would normally look for to be able to understand, do I have certain things going wrong within my execution plans? And I can search through the plan cache to be able to pull back every single plan with those specific operators. When I get to indexing, I'm going to be looking at what missing indexes do I have, what indexes are not being used, what indexes are having writes occur to them a lot more than reads and they're just inefficient. And the interesting thing, I can then take a name of an index and I can look in the plan cache and find every query execution plan that corresponds to that index. And then if I need to dive deeper into what a problem is that I'm trying to troubleshoot, if it's not a specific query, it's an overall instance, I'll go from my weights and queues over to my extended events. And it's very important that we utilize those to be able to then look at what's causing us to wait and what are the problems we're having on our server. And if I need to, I can correlate all that with perf line counters. And so during the performance and optimization, what I want to do is I want to be able to give you a good plan, not only for configuring your server, but also for detecting any issues that you may have. So you could effectively go into an environment and you could plan this over and over again. We will then look at implementing those solutions and monitoring our improvements. Because one of the things I always like to tell folks, and I've got a session at the past summit on indexing, but when I apply an indexing change to try and make my query better, I better not just go away and then never take a look at that plan again, never look at that index again. I want to monitor my improvements. I want to see that my index is being used. I want to see that my queries have gotten better. Sorry, and I do appreciate it. Data Platform Analyzer by SolarWinds. Thank you very much. I appreciate the response. So we want to continue monitoring our improvements, and if we're using a nice third-party vendor like SolarWinds, since I messed up on them, let me give them one more shout out, because I want to understand if those baselines have changed. Once we get a baseline, it makes it a million times easier for us to actually sit there and go, okay, I now see a variance. Let's look at what's changed in our environment and see if we have any issues. All right, Josh, so I've talked the majority of the time. I'm actually going to tag team you for a minute so I can take a drink of water. Tell me a little bit about creating an insightful business platform.
Well, now that you've got the architecture and you know your thoughts around your uptime and the 5 nines and everything Brad's talked about, you want to then go from there, and you have to understand what's going to create an insightful platform for you. So when I say insightful platform, what does that mean? How am I going to build a platform that's going to give me the knowledge to move forward? What tools am I going to need? Now, when I say tools, the first thing you think of is, okay, and I know you've been in those shops. We walk in an IT shop, and I've done it as a consultant many times, and walk in and start talking about other tools, and someone holds up their hand, tell you, wait, stop. We're a SQL Server shop. We're an Oracle shop. That's what we use. That's it. That's our personal silver bullet. Well, here's the thing. There is no silver bullet in IT. Oracle can't do everything. SQL Server can't do everything. So at the same time, you need to build a platform that is going to be comprised of multiple tools that work together to build those insights that you need to see the future, to make smart business decisions. You want to create a platform that serves the valuable data so that if you can't find the data, your business users aren't going to invest. If your business users aren't going to invest, your IT department definitely is not going to invest your time or the money to build this platform. It's as simple as that. And then you want to keep focused most definitely on solving the business problems, not the technology problems that are facing you. It's so easy for us to focus on making, technology-based decisions to solve business problems, and that's where we hit our pitfalls. I'm working with a client right now where they're a very Microsoft-centered shop. So at this point, when I walked in and was talking to them after, looking at all of their use cases for bringing in a Hadoop environment or cluster into their environment, and I said to them, let's look at, a Linux-based, let's look at a Linux-based cluster. Obviously, I got some crazy looks because it's outside of their comfort zone. But just because it is doesn't mean you should discount the platform altogether if it serves your needs. Now, when you're bringing those platforms in, you always want to combine your platforms to optimize the business. Too many times as a consultant, I've talked to companies who want to keep their SQL Server, their data warehouse data separate from maybe what they're doing with some big data work. Maybe they're doing document processing and for full text searching in Hadoop. Well, we don't want those two data points to talk together. Well, once you do that, you're beginning to silo data, which is the whole reason you brought in a data warehouse many years ago, was so that all your organizations or departments within your organization talk together and that you could compare data between departments. Track a sale from buying, purchasing the raw materials to build your widget all the way to it going out the door and then paying the money from that sale to market for the next sale and so on. You want to look to new components for their capabilities. Just because it doesn't work well in SQL Server doesn't mean it's not a good idea. There's a lot of options out there with NoSQL, MongoDB, document databases to create document stores and things like that. Oh, Brad, you advanced too early on me. Thank you. So you want to look at document databases in Hadoop to attack other business problems that don't just fit in a relational database. And you have to realize what is the adoption point of your business. So at what point do you cross the line and say, you know what, this is a worthwhile solution. It's going to give us the ROI, return on our investment, that this is definitely a solution that the business will get behind. You have to understand your business well enough to know where that point is. Just because I have this great idea to put a document database out there that's going to include all of the lunch menus for the cafeteria on the company's headquarters campus doesn't mean it's a great business solution and it's going to deliver that value to the business that they're going to want to pay for it. Just because I can full text search lunch menus back 15 years doesn't mean it's a good idea. Go ahead, Brad. So now we talk about combining the insights or combining the components of an insight platform. Well, what are those components? When you want a full circled insight, do we want to just look at things other than our data warehouse? Well, no. We want to bring our data warehouse together with our non-relational data or semi-structured data, and we want to integrate those two pieces together. SQL Server 2016 is now coming with Polybase. Polybase allows you to query your Hadoop clusters or HD Insight and SQL Server at the same time. It's a great piece of technology that is, again, just helping to bridge and bring together our different data sources and different platforms to make one large insightful platform. We want integrated, flexible data sets, okay? We want them to be focused on critical business analysis. Again, going back to the example of the lunch menus. Lunch menus are not a critical business piece. They are very important to our workday, to have a lunch, to get out of our cubicles or our offices, but they are not business critical. Schema on read allows for that so that you can be flexible with the schema of your data, so that you can set up different schemas for the same data set and attack it on read so that you have increased performance with larger data sets. So that you're not doing your traditional ETL maybe with an enormous data set, but you're only transforming it when you're trying to read it. Makes for quick loads, and with the larger systems like Hadoop, you're going to get faster read speeds than if you were to ETL it into a SQL server, for instance. You want consumption tools that work for your business. If your business is full of analytical minds, like an R&D company, whether it be in the pharma or scientific realm, do they want a tool that gives them, like reporting services, canned reports that they're just going to go to a website and read? No, they're going to want to play with the data. They're going to want to get into it, manipulate it, find other relationships between different disparaging data points. You know, that maybe you want to look at sales data and marketing data, and then look at some R&D data to then see, okay, we spent X amount of dollars on researching and developing this widget. Now, how did it sell at first, and now what do people think of it? Great business case for the auto industry. We spent all this money, coming up with the concept of the Dodge Dart. It's been selling this well. This is how much it cost us to make it. Now, what do people think of it? Ideas like that. Utilizing tools like Excel and Power Query allow those users to be able to get their hands dirty, get in the data, be able to pull out what they want, what they don't want, leave it in the cluster. They're not restricted to specific reports. And they're tools that the business already knows. So right there, you're getting away from having to have that whole training up curve in a lot of ways when you utilize tools like that, because they already know how to use Excel. There's a slight little knowledge curve that you have to get over with Power Query, but for the most part, it's a lot of drag and drop and being able to click and do what you need to do, not a lot of coding. That, again, plays into your hand. And then you want to be able to easily develop the analytics that are going to help you predict what's coming. Because if you can predict, the better you can predict what's coming, the better decisions you can make as an organization. So
Absolutely.
depending on your solution, yes, sorry.
Oh, no problem. And Josh, so one of the things I was going to ask is in showing people a little bit about the way that you could use some predictive analytics to be able to see some insights, or at least to be able to understand themes. When they come to the Past Summit and they see what we're doing in our sessions, I talked a little bit about the demos that I'm going to do with always on availability groups. We're going to be doing some against data warehouses to be able to show the power of the performance and structuring things in certain ways, and how to find queries and indexes and all that stuff out of the plan cache. But when we look at how we tie these things together, what are some things that that you're going to be doing at the Past Summit for your demos?
Well, one of my demos, and probably the shining star demo that I'll be doing, is actually using Event Hubs, the Azure Event Hubs platform, using Azure Stream Analytics, and we're going to collect some web data and actually do some sentiment analysis on the data using Azure ML, actually visualize that data through a simple Azure website that we'll have going live. So make sure to bring your phones so you can access Twitter, because we're going to be tweeting during the event and showing sentiment analysis on those tweets and tracking certain hashtags to actually see, as the data is flowing through Stream Analytics, are people saying nice things about the hashtag? We'll actually debut a hashtag specifically for our pre-con so that we can track that as well, and track whether we're getting good reviews during the pre-con or whether we're getting bad.
Yeah, and I don't think we can use my last name in the hashtag. Either that, or we're going to have to pull out the language filter, because for some reason it just really doesn't like balls.
That might have been in the language filter. I'll have to double check that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I noticed my tweets were always streamed out of that. But no, it should be pretty interesting. I'm looking forward to it because one of the key things that people need to understand is how they can pull all of this together.
Exactly, because if it's not together, it's not as useful. You're going to cut obviously your value in half. If you have your structured relational data systems and you have your semi-structured systems with Hadoop or your streaming data, if you can't bring them together, how much insight can you really gather? Who
Absolutely.
cares what people think of you, but as a company? But if you can track what people think of your company's products, that's a valuable piece.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it just gets back to finding value in your data.
Exactly, and digging into the data, using whether it's finding that value and what it's worth to you. Because with anything, when you're looking for value, using tools like Azure ML to gather sentiment analysis, again, for for instance, with Twitter data, how much is that worth to you to get that insight? Because then that again comes back to the cost of the project that Brad was speaking about earlier. How does your business value the data? Okay, so during my bio slide, you saw I've worked in plenty of different industries. Brad and I both have. One of the industries that kind of rivals others in how they value certain environments and certain data is a software company. So when you think of the need for uptime of your QA environment or your dev environment at a financial company maybe, it's not as big of a deal. I mean, it is still a big deal because you're going to be halting being able to maybe patch some SSIS packages in your data warehouse if dev is down. But think about it. If you're a software company, your dev environment goes down, that's money because now you're not productive. If production's down, that's valuable as well. But your dev environment in a software company is, I would even venture to say, 2 to 3 times more valuable at minimum at a software company than it is at other companies, just because that is how you're making your bread. That's how you're making money.
Well, and not to mention, if you've got a lot of developers sitting there that can't develop, that's probably an issue for a development company.
Oh yeah, because they're sitting there, and if you think about the old gas pumps, from what 30 years ago, where they were mechanical gas pumps, the number, you could just see the rolling numbers over their head. They're just ticking away because they're sitting there and they're not producing anything to come out of it. I mean, that's an enormous loss of value. I mean, to have that environment and have it up and consistently up is just enormously valuable to an organization.
Yeah, I always love it when I hear people go, oh, we can just take it down. It's just dev. Because I always sit there and think, if you want a good metric for losing money, have dev down a lot.
Yeah, and actually, when I was at that software company, I tacked it just like production. That's how I managed it. So one day there was an emergency patch. I needed to put in, I needed to patch something. I needed to do a reboot. I was having issues with the system databases swelling too much, and I needed to move them. And I went over to the developer team and I said, okay, guys, I need to cycle dev. When is a good time? Can we do this? And they said, it's dev, cycle it whenever you want. I'm like, you guys are the developers. This is the business. We can't just do that willy-nilly. This is not just anything. This isn't, your grandmother's laptop that she, searches the internet on. This is serious business here.
I have been some places where it is their grandmother's laptop, though. That's always scary, too.
Oh yeah, especially if they use it for things like phone service or serving up a website or something, the company website. That's scary.
Yeah, so I guess you could say, once we determine, we know that we need value, the next step we need to take is how we approach finding the value, right?
Right. So how are you going to find the value? And from the standpoint of, do you need to do, again, the advanced analytics, or how are you going to present the value? Because obviously, for a lot of your users, they don't understand or care about the technical piece. They want to see the change, and you want to process different kinds of data in different ways to optimize the value. I can tell you, SSIS is not always the perfect tool for loading data. It's going to change depending on how you're going to load the data, where you're going to load the data, what kind of data you're loading. Am I going to use SSIS to process Twitter data? No. I want to use an event hub, and using Stream Analytics be able to tune where that, to be able to point different types of data or different pieces of data to different endpoints. For instance, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, so it's just as important not only to know how we find value in the data, but to understand how we want to process it as well.
Absolutely, because if you don't process it in the correct way, you're going to process it either incorrectly, or you're going to take a big hit on your performance of loading or processing that data in either direction. I mean, if you run an R script on a laptop for trying to run a regression model, is that going to run quicker than Azure ML? Probably not, because Azure ML has the power of the Azure cloud behind it. And grandma's laptop has 2 gigs of RAM and is quad core or Core 2 Duo, so that's about it. Now, how does your current process impact your data's value? So from that standpoint, how are they going to access it? Do they want to access it at any point? For instance, the client I'm working with now, they want to be able to access sales data files raw as they come from the retailers. They want to access a structured version in Hive tables to be able to run some analysis across all retailers. And some of that, some of the users don't even want to get into the data. They want some dashboards up. So again, how are you going to process, or how is your process going to impact the value? You may need additional process to add that additional value. And then to take it to the next level, can you make it more valuable? Incorporating things like Azure ML or predictive analytics with existing data sets that you're culling out of this semi-structured data to be able to take that to the next level. And then once you get to that point, how does a modern approach increase your data's value? For instance, the software company that I worked at, they had a bunch of PDF documents of different projects and the spec documents for all these projects. How valuable and searchable is a bunch of PDF documents? Well, it's a little difficult unless you got it loaded into a document database system, but these were in a file share. So we actually had a big data solution using Hadoop, processing the data, using OCR to pull the words out of the documents, and then be able to make a text search application using Lucene over top of the Hadoop cluster to be able to search the documents and search for key terms that existed within these documents, and then be able to pull them out so that you could find the relevant documents. When you're looking at the value as well, speed and accessibility. If you can't get to the data for a couple of days, how valuable is it? You want to be able to make sure you're designing a solution that will give the answers to your end users in the amount of time that it will make it useful. They don't need it in split second always, but they need it within a time frame to make smart business decisions, or even be able to get a prediction out so that they can make an intelligent business decision before that prediction is just an incorrect fact.
Absolutely. So I think we've got about a couple minutes left for questions. We didn't have any that came into the box. So if anybody's got them, smoke them while you got them. So if anybody's got a question, please feel free to throw it into the question box. While we're sitting here waiting, real quick, in case you haven't realized, this is part of the past summit preview. Josh and I will be presenting our pre-conference section, Optimize All the Data with a Modern Data Warehouse Solution at the past summit. We will be on stage on Tuesday. It's going to be a full day. You'll be able to see all the demos, and we will go in depth in the different sections that we've talked about. I have a general section. I'm going to be doing indexing internals for developers and DBAs. It's got internals in the name, and me giving the talk, so you know that it's going to go a little bit deep, and we're going to have some fun with it. So I haven't seen. Oh, hold on a second. We've got.
I was just going to catch you and say that. Where will we be posting our slides anywhere?
So the slides, we will get those uploaded. I'm going to email them over to the wonderful folks at Pass HQ that manage this for us, and we will get those over to them, and they will have them up. They'll have the recordings up. Everything will be good to go. I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending and taking the time out to be able to come to our session. I know that just one more time, I want to make sure and thank these great sponsors that we've got, Microsoft, Idera, Dell. Dell has been a great sponsor of the 24 Hours of Pass since its inception years and years ago. Pyramid Analytics, SQL Sentry, and HP. All wonderful folks. They're going to have great booths over at the Pass Summit, so if you make it out there, it will be a lot of fun to hang out. And then I will hand it right back. Oh, wait a second. We have one more. Stephanie Patterson. Oh, sorry, I missed the beginning. Can you give me something to point to regarding streaming analytics? So we're going to go into that in a little bit more depth. Josh, do you have any presentations that you're currently doing on streaming analytics?
Not that I've presented yet. I'm actually working on building one up, and I have a blog post I'm actually working on putting out next week on it.
Okay, Greg, keep your eyes peeled for Josh. He's very active on Twitter, at Josh Ludeman on Twitter. Myself, I'm at SQL Balls. Funny story with that, but you'll definitely hear more about that at the summit. And then I will hand this back over to our great moderator with just a couple minutes to go.
Okay, thank you, Bradley, and thank you, Josh. It was a wonderful session to host you both, and would like to just answer the last question by one of our participants. She's asking, will this session be recorded? Yes, it is recorded, and it will be available online within 7 days from now. And upcoming next, as you're all aware, like we are having our session coming up on October 27 to 30, and also feel free to take the SQL Server Index quiz next at Kendra Little. And thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you very much. Kendra, if you are not familiar with her, and all of you should be, Kendra, of course, is one of the partners over at Brunozar Unlimited. She's a Microsoft Certified Master, a Microsoft MVP, wonderful speaker. I am sure that this is just going to be another great session coming up on the 24 Hours of Pass. So go ahead and head over there. I see people leaving the room right now. Thank you guys very much for attending, and we truly appreciate your support of Pass. Go out and find your local user group. Find a SQL Saturday near you on SQLSaturday.com. Take advantage of the community throughout the year, not just right now during 24 Hours of Pass and the Pass Summit. Thank you again so much.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Brad and Josh.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good night, John Boy.